All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Wesleyan chat. I'm Whitney Kaysen. I am the Director of Services School, and I'm going to be talking to four of our previous and current Wesleyan students. So without further ado, I'm actually going to start with Drew. Drew, why don't you introduce yourself, kind of give us a little bit of your military background, and then, of course, can you tell us what you're majoring in?
Absolutely. So my name is Drew Stefano. I am a United States Marine veteran, served as a 0161 postal clerk, uh, and currently majoring in psychology, and thinking about educational studies as a second major as well.
Thank you, Diego.
Hi, my name's Diego Oliveri. I'm also a Marine veteran. I was a motor T operator. I double majored in Latin American studies and education studies with a minor in human rights advocacy, and also played on the rugby team. Loved Wesleyan.
All right, Carlos.
Hi, my name is Carlos Ordonez. I was in the Coast Guard for about 7 years. I was an avionics technician. At Wesleyan, I am majoring in astronomy and Earth environmental science with a minor in planetary science. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
All right, and Taylor.
My name is Taylor Chosas. I graduated from Wes last year. I majored in neuroscience. Before that, I was in the Air Force active duty 2 years in accounting and finance, and then I did 6 years as a pararescueman, and I'm still active in the reserves as a pararescueman. I'm actually back on full-time orders for now before I start an MBA program.
Very nice. So, because of course all we are going to be doing is talking about Wesleyan, what actually drew you to Wesleyan? Like, why did Middletown, Connecticut call your name? Drew, can you tell us about that?
Absolutely. So I've lived in Connecticut since 2015. Born and raised in Florida, moved up here with my family, really kicking and screaming because I didn't want to leave the warmth. So I graduated high school and enlisted in Connecticut as well. After I came back, I went to Tuck Valley Community College, where I got my associates in psychology, and I didn't know Wesleyan existed at this point, and I was adamant on going to a state school until my psychopathology professor was just like, Drew, hold on, really think about your options here. I think you'll really thrive at a small liberal arts colleges. And so when I did research and I looked at Wesleyan, I went on a tour. I instantly fell in love with the campus. The students here are so empathetic, diverse, compassionate, vocal. And I feel like Wesleyan could be a place where I can thrive and call home, and really dig deep. And I applied, and thank goodness I got in.
Very nice. Diego, can you tell us what drew you to Wesleyan?
So I also, similar to Drew, before getting to Wes, had never heard about Wesleyan and did not know about Wesleyan. I grew up in Virginia my whole life. After getting out of the military, I went to community college at San Diego Community College in Mesa, and then Northern Virginia Community College when I moved back home. Did a couple odd jobs here and there. And I was planning to do my 2 years at Northern Virginia Community College and then transfer to a state school. And I was working in the education liaison office, and my boss heard about this scholarship at the time, Posse, and told me to apply. I applied. They gave me the 4 options of UChicago, Wesleyan, Vassar, and UVA. I didn't want to go to UVA just because I wouldn't need the scholarship to get into there. I could just transfer from community college to UVA. Vassar was too small. And in looking between UChicago and Wesleyan, I couldn't really make up my mind. And I remember, I'm blanking on her name right now. Taylor, I don't know if you remember, Nicolette. Nicolette, yes, told me about Wesleyan and really told me, I think that's where you're going to thrive at. So I applied, I went, and yeah, I fell in love with the place.
Carlos, can you tell us about your story?
Yeah, so I was active duty taking a bunch of community college courses at San Diego City College. And I wanted to transfer to a UC school, and this is right around the pandemic, and I kind of gave up on that dream, and I was like, okay, where else can I go, And I actually found the Posse Foundation, and, same kind of deal as Diego, And Wesleyan was one of the schools that they listed. And what really attracted me about Wesleyan was that they had a planetary science minor. At that point, I wanted to be an electrical engineer. That I was like, I need to get a job. I need to graduate and make money. And so I was like curious about this thing that I had in my mind about, space and uh, just kind of like my passion, I guess. And they had an amazing astronomy program that I saw on their website, and I was like, okay, let me give this a shot. And I'm glad I did because I am not an electrical engineer. I don't think I would have enjoyed it. And so yeah, now I'm getting a PhD or I got accepted for a PhD in planetary science. So yeah, it was that little website that they had. So I think is the nicheness of the school that I was really attracted to, and how small the classes were compared to like a big university or a state university.
Taylor, what drew you to Wesleyan?
Yeah, I think a similar theme here between Diego and Drew is I didn't know about Wesleyan or even like liberal arts colleges before going. And the journey really started. I got out of full-time active duty military and I did about a year contracting. And during that time, I was taking online classes and I did the Warrior Scholar Project at Yale. And while I was there, I noticed a contrast between the community college classes I was taking where there's a low engagement. There's few students that were really engaged, but when you exchange essays and stuff, people weren't putting in the effort. They weren't doing the readings. And I was really looking for that education where I would get engagement from my peers. And so when I came into WSP and I got that experience and I talked to professors and advisors there, my focus was on just going to college. I didn't have an idea of what a liberal arts college was or a state school or any of these kinds of things. My family hadn't done that or kind of gone down that path for me. But what I found with Wesleyan, what I kept hearing was there was that engagement, right? That thing that I was looking for earlier, the students and it met those expectations. I think the students come to class prepared and they're excited about the material for most of the classes. And those discussions that you have in the class are really meaningful to me and my learning experience. And then outside of that, the classes are rigorous, way more rigorous. I think we covered everything in my initial biology class in the first 2 weeks of my whole year at community college. It was so fast paced. And so with that rigor, though, also came, I think, a lot of support. The professors themselves were completely aware of everything I was doing on every test, every exam I had. If I did poorly, they would talk to me about it. There was tutorship. There was all kinds of support services. And that was really important to me as well in my success in undergrad. So I don't think I knew what I was expecting when I came into Wesleyan, but those are the things that I really appreciated about that experience. And I'm really glad that I went to a liberal arts college for that reason, even though, the name Wesleyan still back here in Oregon draws a lot of eyebrows. Like I've never heard of that school. It's I think kind of incomparable in terms of the experience I got.
Don't worry about that eyebrow. Many people don't know a school if it's regional. I've raised eyebrows at a few schools that turned out to be very, really, really great and competitive schools. So don't worry about that aspect of it. But I'm really glad that you actually touched on the kind of the academic experience and the difference between the rigor and the student engagement from, being at a community college and being online. Taylor, I'm really glad that you mentioned it. So we have your side of things, and we have a pretty good array of degrees here. So Drew, can you tell us what it is like, what your academic experience has been at Wesleyan? And have there been any challenges or kind of some advantages that you've seen?
Absolutely. So my academic experience is completely different from that of community college. Like Taylor had said, it's a little more rigor here at Wesleyan. However, the amount of support systems that we have in place is really good. Even as a veteran, our professors love seeing our veterans. They love having them in class because we're really vocal. We're not afraid to speak up, raise our hand, and really participate. And often at times, we tend to be leaders in our class and lead discussions. And coming from community college, I had a little understanding of how to navigate academia, but even so, I mean, I've met veterans who haven't been in school since they graduated high school and since they left the service. And for them, the experience here has been really good. They help with the transition, making sure that you're able to navigate academia in an effective way. If you're struggling in a class, one the only thing one needs to do is go to the professor and say, "Hey, I'm struggling. I don't know what I'm doing. This is all new to me." And the professors are really understanding and they accommodate. They know how to work with veterans, and it's been really, really great.
That's really awesome. And we're definitely going to touch on the supports when you've been navigating academia. Carlos, you're in a STEM field. I'm really curious as to how some of that academics has been going for you.
Yeah. So at community college, I did a lot of calculus, a lot of physics, chemistry, and I think that's it. But I thought I was ready for a STEM field at a liberal arts college or a private school, and I felt maybe a little overconfident. But when I got here, it was pretty tough and a little tougher than I thought it was going to be. And it really, I think I was prepared, but what really helped me get through, the problem sets, the exams, preparation for the exams were my peers. My success at Wesleyan comes from making those connections with students. And I think sometimes that's the most difficult part as a veteran in a small school, being able to connect with someone that's 18 years old. I got here when I was like 28. So like there's a 10-year gap and they're like, what are you doing here? And, but I mean, if you get over that and you're able to like, they're there for the same reason you are, you both want to succeed. Oh, everyone wants to succeed and you make that common ground and, you find someone that you can work with, then I think STEM seems kind of daunting, but if you have that support from your peers, it's actually it's a very doable thing. Yeah, I don't know.
I love that because you do kind of get to eat a little bit of humble pie in many regards whenever you're asking, an 18, 19-year-old student to kind of help you with a problem set. I've been there, I've done that. And it's humbling, but also you can see the brilliance of the peers that are around you. Diego, how supportive have your professors been and your advisors been in helping you kind of transition and navigate Wesleyan?
My professors were probably the part I loved most about Wesleyan. What's it called? In community college, even though they're not as big as a state school, they're still pretty bigger than Wesleyan. So you don't get much one-on-one time with your professor. Wesleyan being a school of less than 3,000 students, I had a professor, Professor Saba, who over the summers we would go and grab lunch together. He knew I was 27. A couple times we went and grabbed a beer across the street and just talked and watched baseball games. Other professors, you could just walk into their office hours and just often be like, "Hey, how's it going?" and just have a conversation. So you get a lot of one-on-one time with your professors that you're not going to get at larger schools. And I think that part gets really overlooked to the point where when I was applying for my master's program that I'm in right now at Middlebury, filling out the form for the application, you have to write like, who do you want to have write your letter of recommendation? And I chose Professor Cavallaro. I wrote his email so that they could send him the link. He never got the link because I mistakenly miswrote his email. And he told me I never got the link. And I didn't know until about 7 hours before the deadline was up. I call Middlebury, I'm panicking. And Cavallaro ends up getting the link, texting me like, I got it. And he wrote it at like 8, 9 at night, like way past working hours, but he still wrote me the letter. Like that, I don't think that happens if I'm at a larger school where I'm just where I'm just part of the noise and I'm just another student. I'm taking classes where sometimes it's just 6 or 7 students in a class with the professor. Like that one-on-one time, I think, is something that is not talked about enough, but is really great about Wesleyan and the student to professor ratio.
You're absolutely right. You're not going to see that level of investment in you as a prior service member, but also as a student. You're not going to get that at a much larger school. As somebody who did go to a state school, I I love that. I also love that you had a professor that was able to go in the 11th hour and do that for you, and go well above and beyond, what is potentially the scope of what they would normally do. Drew, can you tell me about some of the interactions and stuff that you've had with professors and your advisors?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I plan on going to the clinical side of psychology. My whole goal is to go into school counseling, and have my own therapy practice on the side as well. And when I had met my first psychology professor, Professor May, who works in the clinical setting and does research for suicide prevention with veterans, um, her and I kind of sat down and she wrote out an entire guide and a path for me to kind of do more research on and figure out how I want to go about getting my master's and getting my foot into clinical psychology. Um, and that really speaks to volume of how much these professors, my professor, cared. Um, is I came up with an interest and I didn't know how to navigate it or what to do about it, and she sat me down and be like, Drew, chill. It's okay. 100%. And that's just one instance. Another instance, I was really struggling in culture and psychology with my readings. I didn't really understand some of the concepts. It just wasn't clicking for me. And I showed up to my professor's office hours, and him and I sat down, and he talked me through it. Um, and these professors aren't afraid to help you and guide you um, in your transition and trying to navigate Wesleyan, because it could be a confusing place at times. Academia itself is confusing to navigate. Um, so yeah.
Definitely. Navigating the bureaucracy is always a very fun learning curve whenever it comes to dealing with some of the institutions of higher learning. I will say, how did everybody respond, or how do others respond whenever you tell them that you're prior service? I'll leave that to the whole group, actually. I'll go ahead. I won't call anybody out. If you want to tell your story about any reactions or experiences you've had, I'd be interested to know.
I have
So
a very oh
go ahead. There you go.
I think one of my favorite interactions was with a professor my freshman year who, um, in class, this professor is very critical of the United States government, the United States military, the military industrial complex. They are not afraid to state their mind that they view the military as being very, at times, very predatory on working class people and poor people and recruiting them into a system that can then be used to uh, promulgate, engage in violence around the world. This professor also, in one-on-one time with this professor, told me that we needed more veterans in academia because there isn't enough veterans as college professors, and it's lacking the veteran voice. And they got me in contact with a former grad student of theirs who is a professor and a Marine veteran down in the University of Texas to try to talk to me about possibly pursuing a PhD later in life and becoming a professor. So at the same time that this person is critical of the institution of the military as a whole, they also separate the individual veteran from it and view them as just another person in this world trying to make their way and understand the way we all are. And I can see how some people, if they would first just hear the class lectures, might be turned off by this professor and think that this professor has a personal gripe or grudge against them. It's like, no, they just have a different philosophy on the world. But if you get to know them and you engage with them, at least this professor was very helpful to me, and one of the reasons why I kept pursuing academia at a higher level.
Anybody else have a story?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about the in-class dynamics. I think, I was in mostly STEM classes, so I didn't have a lot of those discussions that wandered into my background as a veteran, and I didn't bring it up just because, right? But there was a class I took with Peter Rutland, War and Society, and there was a moment kind of early on in the class we were talking about uh, different structures, nationalism, right, in the military across history. And one of the questions he asked was like, who in this class would be willing to put their life on the line for the country? I was getting ready to deploy that next semester, like my junior year. So I have to raise my hand for this one. That's the truth. And I think, I was the only one in class that raised my hand. And I think everybody was surprised that I was in that space and discussing the things the way I was discussing them. But I will say, as soon as everybody knew what my story was, it wasn't in any kind of animosity towards it. Some of the things we've talked about, like jingoism in military, right? We talked about it from a purely academic point of view. And the second they found out what my story was, it was curiosity. Everybody wanted to know my perspectives on certain things as a veteran and the things that I engaged with. And I never felt from that class, from the professor, my peers, I've never felt judged for having, my background that I do. Like I said, I think it was a genuine curiosity that evolved from everyone finding out that I was in the military and actively going to go deploy again soon. So that's been my experience at Wesleyan.
I'm glad to hear that. Carlos, do you have one?
Yeah, I think kind of going off with Taylor, they're just, once they find out you're a veteran, I guess, they just want to know, like, especially if you become friends with them or like you get close to them, they kind of want to know what it's like or what it was like being a veteran. So yeah, I've definitely had that experience.
Actually, I think it's really important to talk about that aspect of it. For a lot of these students, you're going to be the first veteran that veteran military personnel in any way that they've ever interacted with. So you, in many ways, and just like my husband has had to do, you kind of set the stone and you set the standard for what their experience will be, and whether or not they walk away with it with, kind of that negative perspective or more of a positive perspective of them going, oh, okay, they're just regular guys just like us. They're just here trying to learn just like us. They're just trying to do, better themselves. Like you destigmatize a lot of that military industrial complex for them. Just by being there, by being in the classroom, by cracking the jokes, and by being brilliant and bringing up ideas and thoughts and perspectives that they don't have because they haven't had the same lived experience that you have. So kudos to all of you for navigating all of that. It's not always easy, and it's definitely not easy, especially as Diego had said, potentially having somebody with a bit of I hate to say negative, but a different perspective on the military experience, and then, you would have had, and I think you navigated that beautifully, and you still came out with a positive outcome. You're able to have discourse, and different opinions, and still move forward and still have a great experience and still come away with opportunity there, Diego. So getting away from a little bit of the academics, I want to talk about kind of, what it is like to be a student at Wesleyan, but also kind of navigating some of the things that Wesleyan has to offer. So actually, give me a second. I'm sorry. Is there kind of a strong sense of community on campus? And, among other veterans and amongst the student body as well?
Absolutely. So we have a kind of like a veteran club in a sense, Wesleyan veteran students, Westfo, and we're really close knit with the other veterans. It's a few of us, a lot of us are graduating this semester. We're currently trying to revive Westfo, trying to incorporate more outings, meetings, trying to prepare for the next semester when we're expecting more veterans to come. That way we can assist them in getting acclimated to Wesleyan. But not just the veteran community, but there's a sense of community with a traditionally aged student as well. I hate to say it, but I have more traditionally aged college student friends than veteran friends here. And that speaks volume to like how open-minded all the students at Wesleyan are. So yeah, I'm gonna pass it on to.
When I first got to campus, it was COVID fall 2020, August. So it was difficult at first, but luckily we had some really good vets there. Forrest, Jake, Michael Freiberger, who really went out of their way to do the best they could to reach out to us and keep us engaged and let us know, like, hey, we'll try our best to get you acclimated to campus and get you introduced to people. So they really helped in allowing me to feel welcomed, and then they introduced me to other people and the rugby team, which always has one or two vets on it. So that's how I joined the rugby team. And then through there, I was able to find different communities and have a student support group on campus. And because of Freiberger and Jake and them reaching out to me when I became a junior and a senior, I really felt the responsibility to at least try to reach out to the veterans who are freshmen to like keep that cycle going, because the only reason why I had any success was because they had originally really helped me feel welcomed on the campus.
I love that. I also love the idea of paying it forward to those that are coming in kind of behind you, and helping them to navigate it so that it's a smooth transition for them. Um, okay, let's talk a little bit, because all of you are older and non-traditional and coming from vast backgrounds. How's housing on campus for you guys? Is there a requirement for you to live in the dorms? Do you get apartments? Like, how does all of that work?
So housing is guaranteed on at Wesleyan. You're guaranteed housing. You don't have to live in the dorms. Actually, you're not going to be living in the dorms. It's a residential university, so it is a requirement to stay on campus. However, if you prefer to live off campus in an apartment, you can fulfill an application. That way they keep track of where you are. But housing on campus, you'll be living in our wood frame houses, which is owned by Wesleyan. Wesleyan is our landlord. Now, depending on whether a veteran is coming in with a spouse or any accommodations, Wesleyan is super accommodating to that, and will make sure that whatever you need, they'll pair you with that house. So
Yeah, so I live with my wife, and Wesleyan was very accommodating and gave us our own small little apartment. So I think it's not bad. It's pretty decent, and I don't know how it works with like we pay month to month, but it might be different for dorms. I'm not too sure, but I think the living situation is pretty accommodating.
That's good. Diego, Taylor, do you have any input on that?
Yeah, I can. I actually lived in Carlos's house that he now lives in. I came out, I came out with my partner, and I think we were trying to live off campus because we didn't, want to be that involved in necessarily living on campus in the student community. We're both older. She's a working professional, but couldn't find anything that met the needs. And so I talked to Fran last minute, and she put us into a house right away. So I think that was a really nice way to ease into the college academic experience. And it was a very last minute ask, and they facilitated it. And I think it's also the housing prices that Wesleyan offered me were far cheaper than anything I could find around the campus. So they're definitely hooking you up.
I knew that was Taylor's old place that Carlos is in. I know exactly where in the house that is too. What's it called? No, I started in the closest thing to a dorm that they don't even do anymore, which was high-rise apartments. They were the high-rise apartment rooms. They were all singles, but because of new students, the student population grew a little bit, so they took us out of high-rise now, and now they just put you in wood frame houses throughout campus. There's a handful, like 5 or 6 houses that aren't official veteran houses, but the veterans kind of cycle through those houses, and we all know which ones they are. Yeah, they're not. Yeah, they have some that are just blocked off kind of for us, and they're the same 5 or 6 houses they're pretty nice.
I love that. Our experience, we at Princeton, we ended up living in like a graduate apartment situation, and then we got moved to a condo, and we kind of moved around just a little bit. Is there any requirement for you to move out at any point in time, or do you get to have that stability for the full 4 years?
I mean, I think if you have a spouse, or if you have a partner, if you have family housing, you're not required to move throughout the 4 years, and that's been my experience. Like I asked to move into Taylor's place, but that was once he graduated and him and Shannon left, that was my decision. But I think for family housing, you're pretty stable for the 4 years. I don't know what it's like for the bachelors.
So for people who do not have spouses, your long-term residency, you can stay during summer, during breaks. You do not have to move out until you finish here at Wesleyan. They're not going to kick you out. You don't have to check in the school when you get on campus. Fran, who is amazing, she is our direct contact for housing. She already lets the school know and Res Life know that we're here to stay until we graduate. So no, we do not have to move out.
I love that you have an advocate on campus that you know exactly who her name is, and I'm sure you all have her phone number. So you
Absolutely.
know exactly who to turn to if there is any type of like housing situation that potentially arises.
Can I
So
add one thing on that?
yeah,
Sorry,
go
just on
ahead.
the tail end. I think one thing that I actually took a leave of absence my junior year, still in the reserves, and we deploy pretty often at my unit. I did that deployment, and Shannon stayed in the housing. So they allowed us to stay, even though I was on leave of absence, which technically a university usually doesn't do that. If the student's not enrolled for that semester. So that was a huge benefit of, you know, going off and deploying, which is already stressful, knowing my spouse was taken care of and able to stay on university housing. So we didn't have to move out and then move back in once I came back. I didn't mention that before.
I love that. I also know how much work that they probably put into behind the scenes to make that happen, and the stance that they had to take to make that happen. So I love that the university was even willing to do that. That's huge, Taylor, and a huge win for you. Already set the standard for what they'll do for anybody coming after you. So I love that. One of the biggest questions that I get asked is, of course, the financial question of, GI Bill, VR&E. And the big surprise that I get to tell a lot of service members is, hey, if you're really good and you get accepted to a really good schools, you don't really have to worry about GI Bill and Yellow Ribbon. You can talk about, the potential grants and things like that. So can anybody kind of speak to a little bit of the financial aid that you've experienced at Wesleyan, and how that looks for you, without having to go into numbers or anything like that?
I think it's changed throughout the years. But I know my cohort and previous, we've been using the GI Bill as well as VRNE. But I know Drew, we can talk more about this, but I know Wesleyan has changed their whole financial situation for veterans. But I know VRNE is a great, resource for funding, and so yeah.
So really, it's optional. You can use your VRNE, you can use your GI Bill, or you can go the institutional route like I am. I'm on full institutional aid. Um, I'm not well versed in how financial aid runs their process for veterans, although Matt Akery, who is really instrumental for working with veterans to ensure that they get the proper financial aid on a needs basis. He's done amazing work. So you can either use your GI Bill, or you can go fully institutional like I am. It's really just based on what you want to do, if you want to save that GI Bill or not.
I think it's important that you even have the option. Because,
Absolutely.
a lot of times whenever you start your bachelor's, you don't realize that you're going to potentially go on to do a master's, or, potentially go the distance like Carlos and try to go for a PhD. So not knowing where you're going, and potentially what that's going to look like, I think it's really important to even have the option. And I think Wesleyan now they'll give you 2 financial aid offers, correct? Where one will be with institutional, and then the other one will be with using the GI Bill, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so you get to make a fully informed decision. If you started using grants, could you switch over to GI Bill if you wanted to?
I am uncertain about that.
I know it's a pretty unique one.
It's a
I didn't know
really
if anybody
unique
had
one.
done it.
Maybe any 3 of my peers has a definitive answer, but
No, everybody's stuck with
nonetheless.
what they chose on day one.
Pretty much. I
Oh,
stuck with
Okay.
my VRNE, yeah. But if I can suggest something, save your GI Bill just save it just hide it, put it somewhere, because you will need it for your master's, and it's saving me for my PhD. So 100% save that GI Bill.
Absolutely. That's exactly what my husband did, because he knew he was going to go the distance to that PhD. So we shot for institutions that we knew would pay for him to go to school. Okay, let's talk about other resources. Other than housing and money and all of the other things, what else does Wesleyan have to offer?
Oh, it's a very broad question.
It's a very broad one, but I'll narrow it down just a little bit, because an important piece is getting that. It's not just about the academic experience. It's also about internships, access to opportunities. So let's talk about access to opportunities and what that looks like.
Yes.
Yeah. So every summer for the past, the whole time I've been here since 2021, I've been able to do a summer internship where I get a stipend of, I forgot how much it is. You can look it up in the website. Wesleyan provides summer internships that are paid. And so I don't necessarily have to use any VRNE or GI Bill because it pays about the same as the VRNE or the GI Bill would pay. So not only that, Wesleyan has a lot of like STEM grants, and one of them is the NASA. Oh gosh, I forgot the name of it, but it's a NASA grant that you can apply for if you're doing research, and it doesn't have to be space research either. And I actually applied for it so I can actually do my research that I'm writing my thesis on right now, and it's a very substantial grant actually. And so if you're doing research, I know that you will be paid for in the summer, any summer that you spend here at Wesleyan. So it's been pretty nice because I did not want to take classes and do research at the same time.
That's important. Drew, you got excited. What were you excited to
Oh,
say?
the Gordon Career Center. I love talking about the Gordon Career Center. They are an instrumental resource for just over 90% of students on campus who utilize the Gordon Career Center throughout their entirety of the 4 years. The Summer Experience Grant, which is Carlos is speaking of, is a grant that students can apply to pursue otherwise unpaid internships, and it's a grant up to $5,000. And you pocket that money. That money doesn't go anywhere besides your pocket. So there are multiple programs that the GCC, Gordon Career Center, offers, and one of them is the Wesleyan Link program, which allows students, including veterans, this is open to veterans as well, to kind of pursue that mentor-mentee relationship with alum who are well-versed or already graduated and working in their chosen fields. So they pair you up with those alum, and so you get to build that relationship and really understand what it's like to graduate from Wesleyan and then transition into your career. Not only that, for internships and careers, we offer resume building, mock interviews, a bunch of other programs that each one of us can utilize. And it's so that we can put our best foot forward and prepare ourselves for life after Wesleyan.
Love that. I love that for the simple fact that you're doing this for that life after Wesleyan. So everything they can do to set you up for success. And I love that Diego, Carlos, Taylor. Diego, you're in a graduate program. Carlos, you're weighing your options as you are looking at 2 potential PhD options in front of you. And Taylor, you're also weighing some really awesome options for your MBA program that you're going to be going into, which I love that. That also means that I'm sitting here. Drew, I can't include you, but at least 3 of you that are coming out of this have options. There are things that you have your follow-on in front of you. And so how has that been with navigating that transition out of Wesleyan? Like, what has, other than the GCC, has there been anything else, or how have your professors been or your advisors been in helping you navigate moving on to that next phase?
My professors, I was one of the 10% who I probably should have, but I didn't use the Gordon Career Center as much. I relied more on my network of professors and talking with them, Cavallaro, Woodsum, Grappo, Saba. I had a great group of professors in the American Studies and Latin American Studies and Human Rights Advocacy departments that I just talked to them one-on-one, like, where should I go? What should I be looking for? And they were the ones who told me, a big part of grad programs are the professors that you're going to be working with. You should go look at the professors obviously there's always the name brand schools, but go look at the professors who are doing research in certain fields and see if you can email them, talk to them about their research, and maybe, tag along on their research and do research with them. So they're the ones who showed me how to really reach out to professors and basically cold email them and talk to them about the research they're doing in order to help me moving forward in academia.
That's a very important piece, by the way, of that, not knowing how to navigate academia, not knowing what you can and should be doing as an undergraduate student looking at graduate programs. I never would have cold emailed professors going, "Hey, what are you researching? And can I talk to you about it?" Or like, that would be foreign to me coming from the background that I'm doing. But even for my husband, who's like, the professors are here. You're a PhD. Like, why would you even respond to me? But knowing that you had somebody to help you navigate that side of academia is really important, because you don't know what you don't know. And so being able to lean on that, not just the GCC Center, because that's great for going on to your career and everything else. But if you're wanting to go that extra step into a follow-on in academia and continue on, knowing what to look for and how to navigate that is also a very important piece. So having that relationship with your professors, beyond vital. It was a huge, important piece for my husband going through his. And, you know, again, he's just a Marine like you guys. You know, he didn't know how to do a lot of those things. And, you know, who to reach out to as well. Like, they will point you potentially in the right directions, or say, hey, why don't you look at this program over here? Or why don't you look at this professor over there? Or you guys might align over here. They have this insider knowledge that you don't have, because you're not the insider yet, but you will be. Did anybody else have another experience?
Yeah,
I think I
yeah.
can echo. Oh, go ahead,
No,
Carlos.
go ahead. No, you can go. I
I think I
insist.
can echo what a lot of people have already said, is access to professors. Yeah, it's incredible the amount of time I had one-on-one with almost every single one of the classes I took. You know, small class sizes, but also outside of the classroom. I mean, like when my econ professor found out I was going to go to MBA programs, he came up to me and offered to write me a letter of recommendation, right? I think that doesn't happen in a big classroom, and it definitely doesn't happen at most universities. And I did end up having a professor help me with, you know, my package, but also, you know, getting into these programs. So I think I want to echo what everybody else said, is one, access to the professors, but also access to the opportunities. You know, you think about a big state school, you're competing for a lot of those research spots with PhD students, with master's students. You know, I sat down with 3 or 4 different professors and talked about their research one-on-one. And, you know, here's what I'm excited about. Is this a good fit for me to work in your lab? And they all had spots. So I think that that's pretty unique. I know that doesn't speak exactly to the transition, but it does for me, because all of those experiences really helped me when I'm going now to the next step, to be able to reach out to professors and kind of get that comfortability and that confidence to kind of take the next steps.
Yeah,
Your
I like
perspective,
to add
Taylor?
to that. I like to add to that as well. I think it really helps with your confidence having a really good mentor. And I think every professor that I've reached out to, my first year at Wesleyan, I had a astronomy professor who I did research with, and she was super supportive. You know, I was very hesitant in following a astronomy degree, and if it wasn't for her, honestly, I don't think I would still be doing astronomy. But it's that the confidence that they build on you, and then like you can do this, and not only that, but also the research. And then the 3 years following that year, I was able to do research in the Earth Environmental Science department, where I was actually able to do some really cool research that I would have never been able to do anywhere else. And it's the reason, I think, the biggest reason why I was able to, it added on to being accepted to a PhD program. But it also took me to like Japan twice, and I would have never been able to experience that anywhere else. And the quality of research that I was able to do uh, wouldn't have been able for the professors, and their trust and building that confidence in the students is really, I don't know, they do take the time to make sure that the students are successful.
I love that. And that's such an important piece to all of this. The reason why you are working so hard is to gain access to these brilliant minds who will potentially change your life. It was a chance conversation that my husband had that completely changed the trajectory and led him to applying to Oxford University, taking a chance and doing some of the most amazing study abroad opportunities, which has, Carlos, you mentioned that you were able to go to Japan, correct? Has anybody else been able to do anything that led them to another country? Diego?
Yep. As part of the human rights advocacy minor, you take the intro class, and then the second class, if you get accepted into the minor, because they only accept small groups of people every year, is you work on a real case that's currently happening, and you get paired up with actual human rights advocates and lawyers. And the case I got put on, and then they just report back to the professor on how you're doing. I got put on a case to investigate and document human rights abuses that happened during the Nagorno-Karabakh War of 2020 between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And in the spring of 2022, for a week, I went with a Harvard law professor, Thomas Becker, and a Yale law student to Yerevan, Armenia for a week to do interviews with POWs and internally displaced people. And then the following year, 2023, I did a 6-month study abroad at Universidad de los Andes in Bogota, Colombia. And when I was there at Universidad de los Andes, they knew Wesleyan because there was a professor at Wesleyan who they read all of her books. She's a literature professor, Profesora Maria Ospina. And when I was in Colombia, they had flown Profesora Ospina down to Colombia to talk about her book that she had just published. So then I met up with her and I got to talk to her a little bit at the conference after her speech was done. So it was pretty cool to see how, sometimes coming from Virginia, people didn't know Wesleyan. But then I go to Columbia and people are like, "Oh yeah, no, we know Wesleyan, like we know the professors up there because the literature department at Wesleyan's pretty well world renowned."
My mind is blown, Diego, about all of the experiences that you got to have, which again, I don't think that you would have been able to have or been able to really truly replicate or been given the opportunity at a larger scale school. That is absolutely potentially life-changing for you to have experienced. Wow, that's really amazing, and I'm quite jealous that you got to have all of that. Did anybody else get to potentially have any type of, study abroad or travel or anything like that?
So, I was accepted to the University of Edinburgh in Scotland to go study this semester, but I had to um, postpone that until next spring so that way I could do the stuff that I'm doing right now. But I will say that a little more than half of the student population do study abroad. We have over 150 pre-approved programs and 3 of our own pre-approved programs, which include Italy and Spain. It's a really big part of the liberal arts education, and the financial aid that you get here at Wesleyan travels with you. So you can expect the same amount that you get for financial aid to travel with you to, let's say, University of Edinburgh, where tuition's like 20,000. And so whatever extra money that you have, you pocket, you use whenever you're there. So it is a really big part of the liberal arts education.
And I will piggyback off that. GI Bill will not pay for study abroad. Voc Rehab will not pay for study abroad. So I was very nervous because I was on Voc Rehab, and the school did confirm to me, "Don't worry, we'll pay tuition. We'll give you on top of that a grant of money for the semester to find housing and to live." So my housing and most of my food was paid for. I just had to cover the flight there and back.
I love that they took away that hurdle or actually potential barrier. Let's be completely honest with you. That's a huge financial burden to potentially have. And the school immediately saw it and stepped in and said, "Don't worry about it. We're going to handle it. You don't even have to think about it." And then, of course, went above and beyond on top of that to make sure that you were going to be truly financially okay on the other end of it. I have loved learning about more of the things that Wesleyan has to offer and your potential, your experiences that you guys have had. Do you have any advice for any service members that might be considering Wesleyan? And what do you maybe wish you had known before enrolling?
I can start it off.
Yeah,
You know,
Taylor.
I
Let
opened
the
up my
others ruminate.
introduction. What's that?
I said, let the others ruminate a little.
Yeah. I started off my intro saying that the Wesleyan raised eyebrows. And that's, for the same reason I didn't know what it is. A lot of people might not know what it is, but the right people know what it is. I've been blown away by, applying to grad schools. Everybody understands what the rigor of Wesleyan, and they understand the kind of student that it produces. So I wish I would have known that before I came, the amount of opportunity that I had. I didn't understand how big it was that, these prestigious consulting firms recruit on our campus. Like, that is such a rare thing to have. And I just didn't understand that when I started. So I think, understanding how much of an opportunity it is, and then taking advantage of all that. Drew mentioned earlier using the Career Center, right? Tons of opportunities there, but also getting involved in clubs and organizations. I wish I would have taken more advantage of that. A lot of times your plate gets full with academics. And on that too, one thing I wish I would have known is don't overload yourself. I decided to take all STEM classes that were really hard one semester, and it was crushing. So, balance, take a breath, take advantage of all the opportunities and the time that you have now, because it's pretty rare to have this time. And also, like I said, the Wesleyan name has opened up a ton of doors in my professional life. People understand what it meant that I went there, the people that I was exposed to, and the kind of experiences that I had. And so, whatever you're hoping to do, whether that's in science, like I was originally trying to do, or you're taking a hard pivot into something like business, like I'm doing right now, it really set me up for either one of those career fields. And I think that, really glad that I did it, and I wish I would have known beforehand, what an opportunity it was and how far it would go and later on in my life.
Great advice there. Diego?
Yeah, the thing I think people should know is knowing what a liberal arts education is. People don't always know what that phrase means. I didn't know what it meant. And basically the way I can describe it is that other schools, you pick your major and then you have to do your electives, but there's only a certain group of classes that will count as electives towards that major. At Wesleyan, I chose my major and then I could pick any classes I want from any department and they all counted as as electives, which really opened the door, which is why I ended up becoming an ed studies major as well. Not because I really planned on being a professor at the time or a teacher until a couple of professors wanted me to, but I was just interested in the history of education and how that worked and what it was like, and the classes really interested me, so I added it on. And I think that's the part that I think people don't understand, the point of a holistic education, of a uh holistic education, and how it opens the doors, and not to look at your undergrad major as necessarily job training. Like you're there to open the mind and explore different things. I did Latin American history, and now I'm in international policy and development, and I'm basically doing economics. And there doesn't seem to be a clear connection between the two, but it's because in my undergrad, I learned how to do data analysis and filter information and proper research, which is then the skills I can carry on to studying economics at a master's level. Like that's what the point of the undergrad degree is, at least in my perspective.
I think that is absolutely spot on. Exactly the understanding that people need to have. There is absolutely a difference between, a state school, picking your major, and then, picking from a handful of classes for each section within. A liberal arts education is different, and it has a place, and it has an immense value when it comes to that exploration piece. Carlos, do you have any insights there?
You're muted.
Muted.
Sorry about that. Just kind of going off what Diego said, I think, although I took a lot of STEM classes, I think like 99% of my classes were STEM, and if my advice is like, kind of balance it out a little bit, coming to a liberal arts college. But just saying that, like, I never, you think liberal arts where you're not getting like a science, a bachelor in science, you think you're not going to get to do great STEM, and but that's actually not true. Like, the research that people do here, it's very niche, it's very unique. Like my undergrad was based on studying meteorites and how meteorites could have potentially contributed to Earth's water volatile budget. And so, but the research I'm going to be doing for my PhD is going to be completely different. So I think being able to gain many different skills, and it's either computational or writing, I think it all adds up at the end, and taking advantage of each one of those opportunities and seeking out the opportunities is what really has made this experience unique for me. And I think yeah, just it enriches your I guess resume, but also like your growth in general.
Absolutely. Drew, any insights for anybody?
Absolutely, of course. Um, So I feel like often at times a lot of veterans, including myself, are obsessed with the idea of going to an Ivy League school. We're obsessed with Yale, we're obsessed with Harvard, but when one actually takes a step back and ponders really what they want to experience in their education, in their higher education, and do research and how a liberal arts education can catapult them into their career, and really best prepare them the way they want to be prepared and the way they want to be supported. And so it's important to understand what Wesleyan is, not only as a university and how it's going to help you pursue your dreams and pursue your academic goals. It's important to understand the resources that we have and how you can utilize those resources to be able to better hone in on what you want to do. And for me, that's what Wesleyan has been. Um, Even though I was obsessed with going to Yale, um, I, I found more of a sense of community, more of a home here. I found that I had more resources here that I can fall back in this time of uncertainty. And academia can get really confusing. And having Wesleyan here and my professors here and my advisors here, it allowed me to be comfortable in academia and be comfortable in my classes and have the confidence to say, like, yeah, granted, I really want to go to these schools, but I belong here at Wesleyan. This is my experience. This is my home, and it's gonna catapult me.
I think you're spot on. Fit is incredibly important. Just because you really want to go to, a particular school because of its name doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to give you everything that you potentially need. That would be fulfilling, but also supportive, allow you to not get lost and, again, be a part of a community that you'll grow, you'll flourish, and you'll go on to do really awesome, amazing things because you chose the school that was the right one for you, that would nurture what you needed through this experience. Thank you, gentlemen, for taking the time to speak with me, to delve into Wesleyan and how it has been for you. I'm so happy to see that the success of what you guys are going into, and the conundrums that you all are facing of, oh gosh, which really awesome graduate program am I going to accept? I'm incredibly proud of what you guys have accomplished and what your futures are going to hold, and that I get to we get to in a way have a little bit of a part in it, and I'm honored, but also thank you again for leading the way, for creating the groundwork that for other service members to come behind you and also be incredibly successful because of all of the things that you've been able to show and do and participate in. So thank you, and I hope this will convince other service members to take a chance on Wesleyan, and that it will be the best fit for them as well. That it offers amazing supports, great stability. Also, can't say that enough. And again, access to opportunities that you didn't know were out there. So again, thank you, and I hope you all have a lovely evening.